Hello hobby gardeners, farmers and DIY lovers, it's your boy, I am Will, and today's episode of Just Farm Talk, we're going to discuss the two main livestock animals that I keep on my farm, which is on one hand, the poultry. I'm made of chicken and I keep them for their eggs and meat. And on the other hand, I do have the goats, which I keep mainly for their meat. Now, the topic is about which of these two animals I would start my farming with if I were to reset my whole farming business. Now, before we start today's episode of Just Farm Talk, a recap of last for 2022. I still think the problem is not solved and the quality of feed hasn't changed, and I would very much caution you, if you want to go into egg production, poultry farming, I would entreat you to revise your plan, maybe hold on for a little bit, do more research and check the quality of feed and other circumstances. But I think it's mainly down to the feeding, and make a good assessment of the situation before you go into poultry farming. Alright, so the reason why I wouldn't start a poultry farm now is pretty much clear. It's just that I don't trust in the feed quality which is being produced. Last episode of Just Farm Talk, I had conversation with some of my friends who watched the video, and they actually told me that the quality of the poultry feed has been declining way before I even started. So this is not a new phenomenon to them, but I'm just discovering it, and if I knew this earlier, I wouldn't have put in too much effort and also resources into poultry farming. So today's discussion is pretty straightforward to me. If I were to start my farming business all over again, which of these two animals would I start with? Would I start with the poultry animals or would I start with the goats? The answer, after 2 years of doing this, is pretty clear to me. But before I tell you which of these I would start with, and it could be pretty clear to you if you watched last time's episode of Just Farm Talk, I think you would have an idea of which of these two animals I would start my business with, were I to start all over again. But before I get into it, I will put some points down for you and also give you my reasons why I think maybe I would make a different choice or make some changes to how I'm doing things now if I were to start all over again. Now, I'm going to discuss today's topic using points, and the points are not necessarily in the order that I'm going to be naming them, but if you were to consider these points starting your farming business, I think you should look at it and then rank them, because I think you can rank them in order of importance or priority, and then go through each and every one of the points that I'm going to discuss, and this would help you widely before you start your farming business. So the first point is space. Now, when you are starting on a small scale, both animals, sometimes I feel they require space, sometimes I don't. But in terms of chicken, if you can determine the number of birds that you need, you can pretty much determine how much space you need for them, because they would be in an enclosed environment if that's what you were going for. So the space would be pretty much fixed, or the dimensions of the space is going to be pretty much fixed. Once you put up your structure, you know your structure is going to accommodate, say, 50 birds. So that would be it. 50 birds is all you are going to build for, unless you are planning for the future. So you build something bigger than the 50 bird capacity. And if you were building the goat space, on the other hand, the shed in itself is quite small, so goats require small space to sleep in. But problem is with goats, they are very active animals. They need space, they need a lot of movement, they are very stubborn as well, so you would need a bigger space, a bigger yard. So in terms of both animals, I think you require more space for goats than you require for the chicken. I should have left this for the last, but I'm going to put it there anyway, because as I said, it's not necessarily in the same order. But feeding is the next point. Now, feeding to me is the killer and the maker of every business or farming business. In terms of poultry, I have determined that 80% of your profit go into feeding. So whatever amount you generate from your poultry farm, 80% will go back into their feeding. So feeding poultry animals is quite expensive. And also the problem with feeding poultry animals is there is no cutting corners in poultry feeding. If you go stingy on their feed, you would only delay their growth. You you would only delay their capacity to lay early for you, and that means you're going to lose money that you could potentially be generating. So, they delay everything, and you will still be feeding them, because this is the thing with poultry. Whether they lay or not, they will eat the same amount of feed. Now, in terms of goats, and this is based on my experience, I rarely or never buy food for them. We just go into the bushes and we get them shrubs. And I think in terms of feeding the goats could actually be a cheaper option if you were thinking about feeding your animals. Every now and then we buy them a sack of wheat bran, but that would be like once a month, which is equivalent of about £3. I'm not really sure what the exchange rate is, but the goats keeping in terms of feeding is much cheaper, very, very cheap than the chicken. And also the setup, which is the next point. Now, I think in terms of setup, you spend more money setting up the poultry farm than setting up a goat farm. This is because the poultry farm requires more than just the structure. You also need to provide drinkers, you need feeders, and a few other equipments that you need for the farm. You might need the beakers and all those things. So in terms of setup, I think the poultry farm does require more, because the goat shed is really simple. Just put the shed up there on your farm. You don't even need to fence it all up. But what you need to do, which is very, very important, because as I said, goats are very active and stubborn. So what you need to do is fence them in, so they would have a yard to move around. But when it comes to the housing in particular, you don't need to put up a very sophisticated structure. Just keep them dry. Goats don't like water, so just keep them dry with a really good, well-built shed, and they are good to go. Now, the next point is care or treatment. This is also very, very important, and this is for me one of the reasons why I would choose goats, because I'm not in Ghana and I'm currently running the farm in Ghana from here, mainly over the phone. And I realized whilst I was in Ghana keeping the poultry that it is more difficult to keep poultry animals. This is because when they get sick, it's very difficult to determine, and you have to see early signs and treat it as soon as possible. Otherwise, they die just like that. They don't wait for you to treat them, they just go. And so it is more difficult to keep the poultry, in my opinion, because it requires time. You need to spend a lot of time in the barn. Me, after feeding the birds, I stick around for about an hour or two, just observe them. So sometimes I can almost tell every bird in my barn and its characters, and when I see that they are doing things out of character, it just alarms me, and I know. And when you are not around and active in your own farm, people who will look after them, they might be doing a great job, but then they might not be doing all that is needed of them. So it's best, if you're going to keep poultry, to be there in person, or you can have someone you trust, even you can trust with your own life, then you should be fine. Goats, on the other hand, they are very low maintenance. All you need to do is give them the feed that they need, and they're good to go. You don't need to the cleaning is really just cleaning the yard and the shed where they sleep, because goats don't like dirt, and in general animals don't like dirt. So if you want to keep the vet away for a very long time and not spend too much money on treatment, with goats, just clean the shed and you'll be fine. As well as the poultry as well. You need, keeping animals clean is very, very important. But I think with treatment and care, goats require less treatment. Just give them feed, give them water, and they are clean. You don't need to observe them. You should, but the difference in the time that you need to dedicate to both livestock is it's vast. So you spend maybe 3 hours with poultry. With goats, you need to spend about just 30 minutes and you're fine, and you know exactly what's happening. And in terms of treatment, when goats get sick, at least they give you a chance to treat them, because they will not be sick and then die all of a sudden. It can happen, but usually you have a bit of window to kind of treat them, and most of the time you get them back to good health. But with chicken, they just don't give you enough time to treat them, and they just go. And lastly, what I would discuss is the return on your investment. Now, this is the part where it's very interesting. when you are keeping poultry animals like chicken for their eggs or for their meat, they tend to give you a quicker return on your investment. Say if you were keeping broilers from the day you hatch them to when they are ready to consume is about 6 weeks, and they are good to go. So within 6 weeks, if everything goes according to plan, you'll be making money already. And with layers, depends on which type of layers you get. Some of the layers they lay early, some of the layers they need a bit of time. So let's just say you go for the normal ones, which will lay after 16 weeks. In 14 to 16 weeks, you will be making your money from the egg sales. Now you'll be selling this for, I don't know how long you want to keep them. I always recommend 18 months. And after the 18 months, you would also sell, in addition to the eggs, you would also sell the chicken, because you need to get new ones in. And you sell the chicken and still make more profit. Goats, on the other hand, they take a long time. It takes them about 150 days to get pregnant and give birth, and also it takes them about 7 months or so to get ready. If it were a male, it would take it about, say, 7 months to be ready to cross, and if it were a female, it takes about also 6 to 7 months for them to come on heat to be crossed. So when you are going for goat farming, if you were intending to get return on your investment in a short period of time, it wouldn't be that kind of animals I would recommend, because with goats, I would say in the best case scenario, you are looking at 1.5 years, 1 year. But I always recommend you give yourself about 2 years time. You would realize that the return on the investment on the goats is higher than the poultry animals. So based off these points that I've just discussed, and I know I've rushed it a little bit through, but in my own opinion and also from my own experience, I think what I would choose, or which of the animals I would choose, would definitely be the goats, simply because I'm not in Ghana. If I were in Ghana and if I were on a farm, I would maybe struggle a little bit to choose between the poultry and the goats, because I still like the poultry. As I said, they give you a quicker return on your investment. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you sticking around. If you have any comments, please leave it in the comment section or send me an email. Also, like, share, subscribe, very important. And finally, hit the notification button to get all the new updates that I'll be bringing to you.